Amina had always lived in the quiet mountain village, but she never felt truly connected to anyone there. People saw her every day, walking along the narrow paths with a small basket in her hand, doing little chores for families who needed help. She cleaned homes, carried firewood, washed clothes, and sometimes watched over children while their parents worked in the fields. She was known for her calm nature and polite manners, but no one knew how deeply loneliness had shaped her life. She grew up in a house where affection didn't exist. Her parents were good people in their own way, but they were tired souls who had struggled for years to survive droughts, bad harvests, and personal losses. They weren't cruel, they were simply too overwhelmed to show gentle emotions. Amina learned early that she should not expect warm arms around her shoulders or soft words telling her she was loved. She learned that if she fell, she must stand up by herself. If she cried, she must wipe her own tears. If she felt afraid, she must swallow it quietly. She never once felt a hug, not even as a child. The idea of being held was something she watched other children experience, but never tasted herself. As she grew older, the lack of affection didn't make her angry, it simply left her feeling empty. She lived day by day with a calm face and a quiet heart, moving through life like a small bird who had forgotten what a safe nest looked like. But the people of the village didn't know this. They saw only a hard-working young woman who asked for little and smiled politely. They didn't realize she kept her distance because she didn't understand how closeness worked. One winter morning, when the air was sharp and the mountains around the village were white with snow, a man returned after many years away. His name was Harun. His arrival caused a quiet ripple among the villagers. People remembered him as the man who once had a wife and a newborn child, both lost in a terrible accident. After that day, he had left the village, unable to bear the memories. Everyone wondered where he had gone and if he would ever return, but no one expected him to come back after so many years. When Amina first saw him, she didn't know who he was. She was walking home after finishing her morning chores when she noticed a man standing near the old house at the edge of the village. He was repairing a broken fence with slow, steady movements, as if each piece of wood carried a memory. His shoulders were broad, but slightly bent with exhaustion. His hair was touched with gray even though he wasn't very old. His face looked calm, but his eyes were full of a deep sadness that made Amina pause without meaning to. She didn't stare for long. She simply felt something pull at her heart, though she didn't understand what or why. She lowered her head and continued walking, but the image of the silent man stayed with her for the rest of the day. A week later, Amina was asked by an older woman to help clean Harun's house. The woman explained that Harun had returned alone, and the house had been left unattended for years. It needed a young person with energy to clean and organize it. Amina simply nodded and agreed. Work was work, and she was used to going wherever she was needed. The day she stepped inside Harun's house, she felt something shift inside her. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and filled with memories she could not see but could somehow feel. The furniture was covered in dust, the windows fogged with age, and the air smelled of old wood and forgotten stories. Harun stood near the doorway, watching her with gentle eyes. He didn't say much, just pointed to the rooms and nodded politely. His silence was not heavy or demanding. It felt respectful, as if he understood that she was someone who didn't need unnecessary words. She began cleaning, starting with the living room. She dusted shelves, swept the floors, and opened windows to let fresh air inside. Harun stayed nearby, repairing broken chairs and organizing things he had brought from storage. They worked in a quiet rhythm that neither of them planned, but both naturally followed. Amina felt no pressure to talk, and Harun didn't try to start conversations. It was as if they shared an unspoken understanding that silence could be comfortable too. In the afternoon, while cleaning an old wooden shelf, her hand accidentally knocked down a small box. It fell to the floor and opened, revealing a tiny carved toy. Amina picked it up carefully and realized that it was shaped like a small bird. The wings were delicately carved, though slightly broken at the tip. She felt her heart tighten, sensing it was something important, something cherished. Haroun noticed the sound and walked over. Amina immediately lowered her gaze, feeling nervous. She whispered a soft apology, expecting him to be upset. But instead of anger, Haroun simply crouched beside her and took the toy gently from her hands. He didn't scold her or look disappointed. He simply stared at the toy for a long moment before placing it back into the box with quiet care. Amina watched him, surprised. In her life, every mistake had been met with frustration or criticism. Being treated with patience felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. She didn't know how to react. When Haroun gave her a small, understanding nod, her heart warmed in a way she had never felt. From that day on, Amina continued working at Haroun's house. She came every few days, cleaning different rooms and helping organize old things. Haroun never asked her to hurry, never questioned her work, and never made her feel unwelcome. He was a man of very few words, but his actions were gentle. Sometimes, he would leave a warm cup of tea on the table for her. Sometimes, he placed a fresh loaf of bread near her basket before she left. Once, he even set a knitted scarf on the edge of a chair, pretending it was just something he no longer needed. But Amina knew he had placed it there for her. She wasn't used to kindness like this. It confused her at first, then slowly comforted her. She found herself looking forward to the calm silence of Haroun's home, to the steady sound of his footsteps, to the soft way he treated the objects that reminded him of his past. She didn't know his whole story, but she could sense the weight he carried. It wasn't a loud sadness, it was quiet, buried deep, but real. As the weeks passed, Amina started to feel something she had never felt in any place before. Safe. She didn't know why. Maybe it was Haroun's calm presence. Maybe it was the way he never judged her. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't push her to speak or act differently. Whatever it was, it made her heart softer, lighter, as if someone had finally opened a window inside her that had been shut for years. But she didn't fully understand her own feelings yet. She didn't know that her quiet admiration for Haroun would one day turn into something much deeper. She didn't know that his silent kindness would become the first gentle touch her soul had ever known. All she felt for now was a small, warm light inside her. Something new, something hopeful, something she couldn't name. And Haroun, though still lost in his own grief, began noticing the change too. The way Amina's presence eased the heaviness in his chest. The way her calm movements filled the house with life again. He didn't understand it yet, but he felt it. Two quiet souls, each carrying different wounds, slowly stepping into each other's world without planning to. And neither of them knew how deeply their lives were about to change. Amina continued working in Haroun's house every few days, and each visit brought a quiet comfort she didn't know she had been missing all her life. She would arrive early in the morning when the sun was barely touching the mountain peaks, carrying her small cloth bag with simple cleaning tools. Haroun always opened the door before she knocked, as if he had been waiting. He didn't speak much, but his gentle nod and soft eyes always made her feel welcomed. For someone who had spent most of her life being treated as invisible, this small gesture held more meaning than she could explain. Inside the house, she moved with the same calm care she used everywhere. But Haroun's home felt different. It wasn't just a place she worked in. It was slowly becoming a place where her heart rested. The silence between them was never heavy or uncomfortable. Instead, it felt warm, like a soft blanket covering a cold night. Amina didn't know how to describe it, but she felt safe in a way she didn't feel anywhere else. One afternoon, she was scrubbing the old wooden floor in the main room when she noticed Haroun watching her from across the room. He wasn't staring in a strange way, he simply seemed thoughtful, as if trying to understand something about her. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away and pretended to fix a shelf. But Amina felt her heart flutter for a moment, unsure why his gaze affected her like that. She tried to focus on her work, but the feelings stayed with her. A short while later, while dusting a high shelf, she reached too far and accidentally dropped a small metal tin. It clattered loudly, the lid bouncing across the floor. Amina froze. All her life, loud mistakes had brought harsh reactions, raised voices, and sharp words. She felt a familiar fear tighten in her chest. Before she could bend down to pick up the tin, Haroon was already beside her. But instead of looking upset, he gently picked up the tin himself and placed it back on the shelf. His movements were calm and careful. He didn't say anything to blame her or make her feel small. He simply offered a small, almost shy smile that made her heart soften. For Amina, this moment meant more than Haroon could ever know. She wasn't used to simple kindness, especially when she messed up. As the day went on, the quiet rhythm between them continued. Haroon fixed things around the house, while Amina cleaned. Sometimes, they would cross paths in the hallway, and each time, Haroon stepped aside to give her space. Not because he was uncomfortable, but because he respected her. She noticed it in the way he waited patiently before passing her, the way he gently handed her tools when she needed them, the way he never made her feel pressured to talk. In the late afternoon, he walked into the kitchen with a small clay cup of warm tea. Without saying anything, he placed it on the table near her cleaning cloths. Amina stared at it for a long moment before whispering a soft thank you. Haroon nodded once, his eyes kind, and then returned to his work. She drank the tea slowly, letting the warmth settle inside her, wishing the moment lasted longer. By the time she left that day, her heart felt strangely full. The next week, when she came again, she found a folded knitted shawl resting on the back of a chair. It was thick, warm, and clearly made by someone who knew how to weave with care. She didn't know it was for her until she saw Haroon glance at it, then at her, then quickly look away. Something inside her chest softened again. She touched the shawl gently, but didn't take it immediately. She didn't want to assume anything. But when she prepared to leave for the day, Haroon silently picked it up and held it out to her. She accepted it with both hands. Unable to hide the small smile on her face, she whispered, "Thank you," and her voice trembled with gratitude. Haroon's eyes softened. And for a moment, they simply stood there, two quiet souls, exchanging a simple kindness that meant far more than either of them spoke aloud. Days turned into weeks, and Amina kept noticing Haroon's thoughtful actions. Sometimes, there was fresh bread wrapped in cloth near her bag. Sometimes, he refilled her water jug before she arrived. Sometimes, he fixed little things she struggled with without making her feel incapable. Little by little, Amina's heart began to change. She found herself thinking about Haroon when she wasn't at his house, wondering how he was spending his days, wondering if he felt the same quiet peace she felt around him. But Amina was cautious. She didn't understand emotions like these. She had never felt closeness before. She didn't know how to name the feelings gently building inside her chest: warmth, comfort, admiration, and something deeper she didn't dare explore yet. One cold day, she arrived to find Haroon splitting firewood in the yard. His breath rose in small clouds, and his movements were steady and strong despite the freezing air. When he saw her, he set the axe aside and offered a small smile. Amina noticed something different in his expression. A softness, almost like relief, as if seeing her made his day easier. She cleaned the kitchen that day, humming softly under her breath. It was not something she did often, but for some reason, the feeling inside her chest made her quietly happy. Haroon heard her humming and paused in the doorway. The sound filled the house gently, warming the empty corners that had felt lonely for years. A little later, while organizing a cupboard, Amina found an old journal. She didn't open it, but the name, Lila, was written beautifully on the cover. She knew this must have been Haroon's late wife. Amina closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a gentle ache for him. She didn't know the whole story, but she could see the love he still carried in his quiet, respectful way of preserving memories. She placed the journal back where she found it, carefully and with deep respect. When Haroun came into the room, he noticed her thoughtful expression. He paused, then walked slowly toward her. For a moment, it seemed as though he wanted to say something about the journal. His eyes softened with an emotion she didn't fully understand. But in the end, he simply shook his head gently and offered a small smile, one that told her not to worry, that he appreciated her gentle respect for his past. In that moment, Amina felt something shift in her heart. She realized Haroun's silence wasn't emptiness, it was depth. His quietness wasn't distance, it was gentleness. He wasn't avoiding the world, he was carrying sorrow with dignity. And somehow, she felt honored that he allowed her presence in his home, in his quiet world, even if he didn't say it aloud. One evening, as she was about to leave, a light snow began falling. Haroun walked her to the door, holding a small lantern so she could see the path. The snowflakes landed softly on Amina's hair and shawl. She looked up at the sky, smiling softly at the beauty of the moment. Haroun watched her quietly, noticing how peaceful she looked. He didn't say anything, but his eyes held an expression she had never seen from him before, an unspoken tenderness. Amina wrapped her new knitted shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped outside. Before she walked away, she turned back. Haroun was still standing in the doorway, holding the lantern, watching her with gentle concern, as if making sure she would reach home safely. Amina's heart warmed in a way that surprised her. She had never been looked at with such quiet care. She whispered a soft goodbye, and though Haroun didn't speak, his nod carried more warmth than a dozen spoken words. As she walked home through the falling snow, she felt something new settling inside her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about how lonely she felt. She wasn't thinking about how empty her home was. She was thinking about Haroun, his silence, his kindness, his gentle actions that spoke so much louder than words. She didn't fully understand it yet, but she was beginning to fall into something deeper, a feeling she had never known. And though he didn't show it openly, Haroun's heart, too, had begun to warm each time Amina walked through his door. Their quiet connection was growing, slowly but surely, like a small flame in a cold room. Neither of them realized how important they were becoming to each other, but fate had already taken its first steps, bringing together two souls who had lived too long in loneliness, preparing them for a bond that neither had expected, but both needed more than they knew. The winter storms in the mountain village grew heavier as the days passed. Thick clouds often hid the sun, and sharp winds rushed between the houses. People stayed indoors whenever they could, lighting fires early and finishing their outdoor chores as quickly as possible. Amina, however, continued going to Haroun's house regularly, no matter how cold it became. Something inside her pulled her there, something warm and gentle that she had never felt before. It was not obligation anymore. It was something deeper, something she didn't know how to name yet. One afternoon, the sky darkened earlier than usual. Heavy snow began falling, and the air grew colder than normal. Amina had planned to go home after helping Haroun tidy up an old storage room, but Haroun insisted she leave early so she wouldn't get caught in the storm. She nodded and wrapped her shawl around herself, ready to walk into the freezing wind. But as soon as she stepped outside, the snow blew fiercely, pushing against her small frame. She could barely see the path. Haroun appeared behind her, gently touching her shoulder to stop her. He stepped aside and opened the door wider, silently telling her it was safer to wait inside until the storm softened. Amina hesitated for only a moment, before stepping back into the warm house. Haroun closed the door carefully, making sure no wind rushed in. Inside, the house felt different. With the windows covered in snow and the fire crackling warmly, the space felt more private, more intimate. Amina removed the snow from her shawl and placed it near the fireplace. Haroun brought more wood, feeding the flames until the room glowed with soft warmth. Amina watched him quietly, noticing how thoughtful every movement of his was. The storm grew stronger outside. Snow tapped against the windows, and the wind howled through the cracks of the old house. Amina sat near the fire, rubbing her cold hands together. Haroun noticed how badly she was shivering. He left the room for a moment and returned with a thick blanket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. His touch was gentle, almost hesitant, as if unsure whether it was appropriate. But the kindness in the gesture filled Amina's heart. She pulled the blanket close, letting its warmth seep into her cold body. Haroun sat a little distance away, not wanting to make her uncomfortable, but still near enough that she felt protected. They stayed like that for a long while, listening to the storm outside. The silence between them was peaceful, but Amina's heart beat faster than usual. She wondered if Haroun felt the same strange comfort she did. After some time, her trembling didn't fully stop. The cold had sunk too deeply into her. Haroun watched her hands shaking slightly, and a concerned expression crossed his face. He stood, walked closer, and knelt beside her. For a moment, he hesitated. Amina looked up, confused, not expecting him to come so close. Haroun's eyes softened, and then, in a gentle and respectful way, he placed his arms around her shoulders to warm her. Amina froze. Her breath stopped. Her mind didn't know how to react. Her heart raced with a strange mix of fear and overwhelming warmth. His arms were strong but soft, steady but careful, as if he was holding something fragile and precious. Amina felt the heat of his chest, the gentle weight of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was a feeling she didn't recognize, something foreign yet deeply comforting. For a long moment, Amina didn't move. She didn't know how to. Her body was stiff, shocked by the newness of the embrace. Haroun felt her tension and loosened his hold slightly, ready to pull back if she felt uncomfortable. But something in Amina's heart suddenly softened. She slowly relaxed, leaning closer, letting the warmth soothe her shivering body. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe in someone's arms. A soft sound escaped her lips, not a cry, not a word, but something between relief and surprise. Haroun felt it and held her a little more steadily, offering quiet comfort without saying anything. His silence wasn't awkward, it was gentle, filled with care. Amina's eyes slowly closed as she rested her cheek against his shoulder. She didn't understand why tears gathered in her eyes, but they did. After a moment, she realized she was crying. Not from sadness, but from something that had been buried inside her for years. Loneliness, longing, the ache of never being held, never being comforted. Haroun felt her trembling and tightened his arms just a little more, offering support without asking for anything in return. Amina cried softly, letting her tears fall freely for the first time in a long time. It was as if her heart had been locked for years, and Haroun's gentle warmth had finally opened the door. When her tears slowed, she slowly pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. She felt embarrassed for crying, but also strangely relieved. Haroun didn't look at her with pity, only with understanding. He handed her a soft cloth to dry her tears. She accepted it with shaky fingers. "I didn't know a hug could feel like this," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was the first time she spoke since the hug began. Haroun looked surprised by her words, but didn't interrupt her. "I never had one before," she added softly, almost ashamed. Haroun's face shifted with emotion, sorrow, understanding, and something tender she couldn't name. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder, giving her a small nod that told her she didn't need to feel embarrassed. The storm raged outside, but the room felt warm and peaceful. They sat quietly for a while, breathing in the calmness of the moment. Amina held the blanket close, still feeling the echo of his arms around her. As the hours passed, the storm began to soften. The wind lost its strength, and the snow fell more quietly. Amina stood slowly, preparing to leave. Haroun walked her to the door, but his steps were slow, as if he didn't want the evening to end. Amina felt the same. Something had changed between them. Something deep. Something unspoken, but powerful. When Amina reached the doorway, she turned back to Haroun. Her eyes were soft, grateful, and full of a new emotion she didn't yet understand. Haroun held the lantern again, lighting the path for her. Their eyes met for a moment longer than usual. She wanted to say something meaningful, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, she offered him a small, warm smile, one that carried all the gratitude her heart held. Haroun returned the smile with a gentle expression she had never seen from him before, a softness that seemed to say he cared far more than he could express. Amina stepped outside, the snow crunching under her feet. She walked slowly, feeling the warmth of his hug still wrapped around her like an invisible blanket. Every step felt lighter than usual. The night was cold, but her heart felt warmer than it ever had. As she walked down the snowy path toward her home, she touched her chest softly, remembering the feeling of his arms, strong, steady, comforting. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "So this is what a hug feels like." She didn't know it yet, but that simple, gentle moment had changed her life forever. Haroun's quiet embrace had awakened something inside her, something tender, something brave, something that told her she was worthy of love and warmth. And at the same time, back in his house, Haroun stood by the window, watching her disappear into the snowy night. He touched his chest lightly, feeling the same warmth she felt. For the first time in years, his lonely heart had begun to stir again. Both of them lay awake that night, thinking about the hug, the warmth, and the strange, beautiful feeling growing between them. Without saying a word, their hearts had spoken for the first time. After the night of the storm, Amina found herself thinking about Haroun more often than she expected. Every time she remembered the warmth of his arms, her heartbeat changed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was something soft and new. Something that made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. She had always believed she was meant to live a quiet life alone, unseen and untouched by affection. But now, she knew what it felt like to be held with kindness, and that memory refused to fade. The morning after the storm was calm. The village looked fresh under a thick blanket of snow. Amina wrapped her shawl tightly and walked toward Haroun's house. She didn't know if he expected her to come, but something inside her felt pulled toward him, as if her heart had learned a new direction. When she reached the door, she hesitated for a moment. She remembered how she had cried in Haroun's arms, how vulnerable she had felt, how close they had been without saying a single word. Part of her worried that things would feel awkward now. But when Haroun opened the door before she even knocked, all those worries melted. He looked at her with the same gentle expression he always wore. But there was something new in his eyes, too, something warm, something quietly hopeful. He stepped aside to let her in, and the moment she entered, Amina felt the same peaceful comfort she always felt in his home. Haroun had already lit the fire, and the house smelled of freshly baked bread. It looked like he had been expecting her. He motioned toward the table, where he had placed a small plate of warm bread slices and honey. Amina's heart warmed at the sight. She sat slowly, touched by the simple kindness in the gesture. As they ate in silence, Amina found herself looking at Haroun more often. His calm face, the lines formed by years of both grief and strength, the gentle way he moved everything about him, gave her a sense of safety she had never known. Haroun, too, seemed to look at her with a softness he no longer tried to hide. It was as if the hug from the night before had quietly changed something between them. something neither of them needed to explain. After breakfast, they worked together outside to clear snow from the small pathway leading to the gate. Haroon handed her a smaller shovel he had cleaned and repaired. It fit perfectly in her hands. Each time their eyes met, a quiet smile passed between them. They didn't need words. Their hearts were already speaking. When they finished, Haroon pointed to the small garden behind the house. It was covered in snow, but Amina followed him anyway. He brushed some snow off a wooden bench and motioned for her to sit. She sat down carefully, looking at the trees, the mountains, the peaceful village spread across the valley. The air was cold, but she didn't shiver. Haroon sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them, yet close enough that she felt warm. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Amina took a quiet breath and finally found the courage to speak about something she had never spoken about before. "I never knew what comfort felt like," she said softly. "Not until that night." Haroon turned to her slowly, listening with full attention. "I didn't know what a hug meant," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know it could feel so warm, so safe." Haroon's eyes softened with deep understanding. He didn't interrupt her, didn't rush her, didn't try to fill the silence. His patience made it easier for her to continue. "When you held me," she whispered, "it felt like something inside me finally woke up." Haroon lowered his gaze for a moment, overwhelmed by the honesty in her words. When he looked back up, his expression held a quiet promise. Gently, slowly, as if asking without words, he reached out his hand. Amina hesitated only for a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged together. The warmth of his touch sent a calm wave through her. She looked at their joined hands and felt her heart swell with a feeling she had never experienced before. A feeling that was growing stronger every day. Over the next few weeks, Amina and Haroon grew closer in a steady, natural way. They shared meals, took walks through the snowy paths, repaired small things around the house together, and spent many evenings quietly sitting near the fireplace. Their connection didn't need dramatic moments or loud declarations. It grew through gentle actions, patient understanding, and silent trust. Amina began to laugh more often, small, shy laughs that warmed the room. Haroon, who had lived in silence for years, found himself talking a little more, just enough to let her know she mattered to him. He told her stories about his childhood, about the trees he climbed, about the stream where he used to fish. He didn't speak about his past pain unless she asked gently. And even then, he spoke with quiet strength, trusting her with the parts of his heart he had kept locked away. Little by little, the heaviness in his chest began to lift. Amina's presence brought light back into his lonely home, and her gentle spirit soothed wounds he thought would never heal. One evening, near the end of winter, Amina arrived later than usual. Haroon opened the door, with concern in his eyes. Before he could ask anything, Amina stepped inside and looked at him with a soft, trembling smile. "I wanted to see you," she said quietly. "Even if it's late." Haroon's eyes softened, and he guided her toward the warm fire. She sat beside him, and for the first time, she didn't wait for him to make the first move. Instead, she leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Haroon froze for a moment, surprised, then slowly relaxed. He wrapped his arm around her with the same gentle care as the night of the storm, and Amina closed her eyes, letting her heart rest. In that moment, both of them understood what their connection had grown into. Amina finally lifted her head and looked into his eyes. Her voice was steady, filled with quiet certainty. "Your arms taught me what love feels like," she said softly. "I never knew it before, but now I understand." Haroon felt something deep inside him shift like a frozen river, finally beginning to flow again. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hand over her heart, letting his expression say everything his voice couldn't. Amina took his other hand and held it tightly. There was no confusion in her eyes, no fear, only trust. From that night on, they were no longer two lonely souls who met by accident. They became two hearts, choosing each other, healing each other, building a life together piece by piece. The villagers eventually noticed their closeness. But neither Haroun nor Amina paid attention to whispers. They walked side by side, their steps in harmony, their emotions gentle but strong. When spring arrived, the snow melted, revealing fresh grass and blooming flowers. Haroun planted new seeds in the garden, and Amina helped him water them. Their home, once filled with silence and sadness, now echoed with quiet joy. One morning, as the sun painted the mountains in gold, Amina wrapped her arms around Haroun from behind. He turned gently. Surprised but pleased, she looked up at him and whispered with a smile that came straight from her heart, "This time, I'm the one giving the hug." Haroun held her close, cherishing every moment of the embrace. For the first time in many years, peace filled his soul fully. And for Amina, the girl who grew up without a single hug, this life, this love, felt like a miracle she never knew she deserved. But now, she understood it completely. She didn't know the feeling of a hug for most of her life, but in the arms of a silent widower, she finally found love, warmth, and a home for her heart.